I am an aspiring diplomat or a future diplomat, and my goal is for us to all be co-workers. So with that being said, we're very grateful to have someone with experience, real experience, that's going to help us. And not to say that the prior facilitators that we've had don't have experience, but this experience is unique to what we desire to do. So with that being said, we're going to be talking about diplomatic chain reactions, U.S. and Russian nuclear cooperation, and the legacy of nuclear testing with Ambassador Tom Armbruster. Today is January 26th, and interesting enough for January 26th, some other things that happened in U.S. history. Michigan admitted as the 26th state. Louisiana succeeds from the Union. War Department, which is now called, authorizes recruitment of black soldiers in 1970. Virginia readmitted to the Union. 1942, first U.S. troops land in Europe, specifically Northern Ireland during World War II. In 1986, the Space Shuttle Challenger lifts off. In 2005, Condoleezza Rice sworn in as Secretary of State. Little tidbits of information that you just can never have too much of. Also, announcements: the February FSOT is on. So the testing window is going to be between February and March. So February 28th through March 7th, and the actual registration where you can register for those dates is going to be the 16th. So get ready, because that is coming soon. And also, last announcement, we are officially 600 future diplomats today. So thank you for those that are joining, growing, and learning with us. Okay. It's that time. It's that time for our speaker. It's my honor to introduce tonight's speaker, Ambassador Tom Armbruster. Ambassador Armbruster served over 30 years in the United States Foreign Service under multiple administrations, including Presidents Reagan, George H.W. Bush, Clinton, George W. Bush, and Under Secretary of State George Shultz, James Baker, and Madeleine Albright, and Colin Powell. He served as U.S. Ambassador to the Marshall Islands, U.S. Ambassador to Papua New Guinea, the Solomon Islands, and I'm going to say this wrong, so bear with me, Vanuatu. Did I say that right, Ambassador?
Vanuatu.
Vanuatu. Thank you so much.
And actually, disclaimer, that I did not serve there. I went TDY to Tonga to open that embassy, and served under the ambassador to Fiji, who covers those islands you mentioned.
Oh, good to know. With that being said, I think I will just pass it over to you, because I want to make sure that the bio is correct. Ambassador Tom, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. I'm sure you're busy. I love this organization. I want to put in a special plug first about languages. I really think that's the single most important determinant of success and morale in the Foreign Service. So the fact that this organization, that Travis has kicked off these language learning opportunities, I think is a really good thing, and it's worth their time. It's very hard. It's hard to learn languages. It doesn't come easy, but the investment will pay off. So thank you again for showing up tonight. And I'm hoping this deep dive into nuclear issues illustrates the breadth of Foreign Service work. It's not the only thing I worked on, nuclear issues, but it's one thread that continued throughout my career. And you can be sure nuclear issues are never going away. Before we jump into that, a word on Greenland, since that's in the news. Why would the State Department send a polar affairs officer every year to Denmark and Greenland? Well, science. The U.S. has science activities in the Arctic and Antarctic, and the Greenland missions require Danish approval. So every year, a polar affairs officer would go to Denmark with the proposals give a speech highlighting some of the research. And in my case, while at the conference, I got an invite to go to Greenland as well. I was invited by the Air National Guard, the wing in Schenectady that supports the scientists. One of the guardsmen asked if I'd like to go to Cool School. And I said, sure, what is it? Well, it's 3 days on the ice at -40. You land on a ski-equipped C-130 and learn how to signal for help, make the most of any food available, and above all, stay warm. Not easy. I had a water bladder around my neck that was supposed to stay thawed by my body heat, but I didn't produce enough heat, so it froze. And I ended up sipping on ice chips. People who graduated from Cool School got to sleep in tents, and the rest of us made our snow shelters, first with a parachute for a group of us, then in pairs in snow caves. And we weren't alone on the ice. The Cirrus Patrol, the Danish skiers who spend months in Greenland, were also there and stopped by our camp. The Special Forces guys who kept us safe in Cool School were definitely cool, but the Danish patrol was simply on another level. They were shadowed by a friendly Arctic wolf that looked for scraps, and the whole thing was pretty unforgettable. We saw the military base, Thule, and saw how the ropes connected buildings so you wouldn't get lost in a blizzard. The Greenlanders I met were not fans of the U.S. for the simple reason that we forced them to move. The military determined that the site of the Thule base had to be in the exact spot where their village once was. And I've seen that look where someone would kill you if they thought they could get away with it. I saw it in Kabul too, just daggers. They say if a journalist goes to the Arctic on a layover, they write a newspaper article. If they spend a weekend, they write a magazine article. And if they spend a week, they write a book. So I don't want to oversell my Greenland credentials. A couple of trips under State Department auspices did not make me an expert on their resources or even the strategic advantages that we don't already enjoy that this new framework supposedly includes. But I appreciate that we live in a world of competition everywhere. The Arctic, the Pacific, Africa, every theater is a battleground for great power competition. And I did write an article for State Magazine. So I wanted to start with something a little bit timely. There are certainly other timely issues that are very important these days that maybe we'll get to in the questions. But on to nuclear issues. This is my generalist brain's understanding of nuclear power and weapons. First, get the atoms moving. In a nuclear power plant, the radioactive isotope uranium-235 reacts when the fuel rods are close enough. A neutron hits a fuel atom, splitting it, releasing more neutrons. And that chain reaction produces heat and releases energy. That's fission energy, where the atoms split. Water or gas moderate and control the reaction, then just add water, produce steam to turn turbines, and you can power a city. Fusion energy is the same process, but the atoms fuse together. That's how the sun works and maybe the future of energy. With a nuclear weapon, conventional high explosives implode on a pit, basically a ball, plutonium ball, inside the high explosives. That causes the fuel atoms, plutonium-239 more than likely, to release neutrons again, hitting other fuel atoms, causing a chain reaction and a massive uncontrolled release of energy. That was part of the class I went to at the Department of Energy for a Q clearance for access to and the ability to report on top secret information related to nuclear issues. Reactors, weapons, diplomacy, education, life. One thing leads to another in a chain of events that makes the outcome seem inevitable. Ideas and people can be the neutrons that start new chain reactions. I'll talk about the links in the chain that led me to Artemis 16 or Sarov, Russia's premier nuclear weapons city. The links that led me to stand on Runit Dome, the concrete cap covering nuclear debris in Bikini, and links bringing me to you. All of you have your own chain reactions leading to different fields of study, careers, friends, contacts, travel. Maybe this talk will start a new chain reaction for some of you. I'll highlight some golden opportunities. So here's my chain of events. An environment class in 8th grade sent me out on the Chesapeake Bay with an oysterman, sparking a lifelong interest in environment, particularly the marine environment. A year in Moscow with an American diplomatic family when I was 17 started the chain reaction to a diplomatic career. And I spent 6 years in journalism before I got into the State Department. So environment, journalism, and diplomacy are the raw materials, the plutonium-239 and uranium-235, so to speak, that fuel some of the chain reactions in my life. At Hawaii Public Radio in Honolulu, before I joined the state, I interviewed a Hiroshima survivor. She was on a world tour for nonproliferation, and I'll never forget her sincerity and simplicity. She said, "I don't want it to happen again. Not to you, not to me, not to anybody." I can still hear her voice. That was my first-hand experience with nuclear consequences. After Hawaii, I joined the Foreign Service, had tours in Helsinki and Havana, then was assigned to Washington and worked as a Polar Affairs officer on Arctic Council issues, whales, polar bears, indigenous issues, a great portfolio. I helped organize an international exercise in Anchorage called RAIDEX. And over the course of several days, policymakers, scientists, and nuclear experts simulated a nuclear accident in the Arctic and the likely government responses. All 8 Arctic countries sent teams to Alaska, including Russia. We detailed and discussed what we would do as the radiation spread. When do you close schools? Distribute iodine? Basically, how do we do a better job if there's another Chernobyl? This was aimed at the Bilibino plant in Russia. We called it Arctic Land so as not to offend the Russians. That exercise was a win. So on to Russia as nuclear affairs officer at the embassy. Originally, I was assigned as environment officer, and I thought, oh, good, polar bears again, but bait and switch. When I got there, they said I'd have the nuclear portfolio. I resisted, then realized nuclear issues are the biggest environmental issues out there. As a diplomat, I came to see the inextricable link between nuclear weapons and environmental catastrophe. Whether it's Chernobyl's radioactive fallout or Runit Dome in the Marshall Islands, the environmental scars left by nuclear testing and accidents are inseparable from the history of conflict. Peace and environmental stewardship go hand in hand if we're to avoid past mistakes. So let's take stock a little bit. If you think back to Russia in the 1990s, after the fall of the Soviet Union, you could characterize it as a time of ambivalence and insecurity. Now we're in a time of belligerence and aggression, but there was a window there. At the embassy, I worked with Alexei Davidov. We still had Russian staff in the 90s, and Alexei was a Chernobyl first responder. Before joining the embassy, he worked for Russia's equivalent of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, Gosatomnadzor. So actually, he was a second responder. Thanks to his being at his dacha on the day of the explosion, he missed the first call. He was exposed to radiation, but survived, and he has a lifetime pass on the Moscow subway for his heroics. There's a memorial for the 28 firemen and plant workers who did die at a cemetery in Mitino, just outside Moscow. Families come every year and leave flowers, bread, and vodka. I went one year and saw a little girl use her handkerchief to clean a bronze death mask, maybe your grandfather. Alexei and I spend most of our time at the Ministry of Atomic Energy. The U.S. and Russia were at the height of our post-Cold War cooperation, and nuclear cooperation was paramount. By then, American and Russian scientists had gained a measure of trust and even friendship. They exchanged photos of their grandchildren. The nuclear programs included material protection, control, and accounting. That was safeguarding Russia's nuclear weapons with cameras, computers, and alarms. The HEU-LEU agreement. This was the big ticket program, highly enriched uranium to low enriched, or also called megatons to megawatts. That converted 500 metric tons of Russian highly enriched uranium to low enriched for burning in U.S. nuclear plants. It was enough to power the entire U.S. energy budget for 2 years. 20,000 warheads were taken off the street, generating $17 billion for Russia. A big win, but with an asterisk. Other programs got started but never achieved critical mass. A plutonium disposition agreement signed in 2000 and suspended by Russia in 2016. Work on next generation nuclear reactors, initiated, then halted. Had that continued, maybe we'd have fusion energy today. The Nuclear Cities Initiative, a Department of Energy program to retrain Russian weapons scientists to civilian projects. All these programs were led by DOE, and one of the main drivers was Rose Gottemuller, who we'll meet again a bit later in this talk. The military had similar programs under the Cooperative Threat Reduction Program. Does any of this sound familiar? When I talk to people about this level of cooperation, most Americans don't know about it, and certainly the Russians didn't. Sarov, or Artemis 16, was one of the places where top Soviet nuclear scientists lived and worked. Americans build fences around nuclear labs. the Soviets built fences around whole cities, and those cities were reserved for the creme de la creme. I flew to Saarov with Senator Pete Domenici, one of the architects of the U.S. nuclear programs. And here's the asterisk. There was still resentment in Russia. "You destroyed us," was how one senior Ministry of Atomic Energy official described the end of the Cold War. And looking at the tattered curtains, abandoned grand piano, and cobwebs in the ballroom, I could see how he would come to that. Adding to that resentment, there was no image of America's cooperation, no public diplomacy. It would have really made a difference if the average Russian could say, "My kid was born in the American hospital," or goes to the school the Americans built. Of course, the Russians were never going to make it easy. Their motto seemed to be, "We're not going to just roll over and take your money." I mean, they kicked out Peace Corps and USAID. Aviation investigators look for a causal chain after an accident. The pilot overslept, skipped something on the pre-flight checklist that led to the crash. For me, the causal chain explaining why the Baltics became successful European states while Russia reverted to imperialism and repression lies in our decision not to pursue a Marshall Plan, to not only get Russia on its feet, but show the Russian people who we are. The Baltics were adopted by the Nordic states, with Finland helping Estonia, Sweden and Norway helping Lithuania and Latvia, and we never took on that role. At one point, I wrote a memo recommending adding environmental programs to the nuclear programs, something a little bit more visible. I was physically threatened by a staffer. For the State Department's assistance ambassador, there was no appetite for anything that did not center directly on increasing America's national security. After all, Russia still had nuclear weapons and could revert to a zero-sum game with America at any moment. The Russians were not teddy bears then either. At one point, U.S. sensors picked up a seismic event in the Kola Peninsula. I asked one of my nuclear scientist contacts about it, wondering if it was some kind of subcritical test. And the next day I had a red laser on my shirt. Russians take nuclear stuff very seriously. And while diplomats have démarches and their own way of communicating, the intelligence community also sends messages. And in the end, they could not have America in their knickers. Of course, maybe the causal chain explaining Russia's current belligerence starts with the Mongols or Napoleon or the Nazis. I don't know, but we did have an opportunity. And there may be another window after Putin. This is opportunity number one. Maybe one of you will be the architect of a new U.S.-Russian relationship. Maybe your college or your institute or alma mater could open a sister institute in St. Petersburg or Moscow or Kamchatka. We need to do better next time and be ready when and if a window opens. One other thing to think about vis-a-vis Russia and Ukraine. Ukraine had nuclear weapons. They were the third biggest nuclear power with 1,700 warheads. We convinced them to give them up in return for security guarantees. The US, Russia, Ukraine, and the UK all signed the Budapest Memorandum. So is the lesson, if you have nuclear weapons, don't give them up? Is that a correct reading of history? Or will Ukraine come out of this war as an intact democracy without the burden of a nuclear arsenal? So I look forward to your comments and questions on Russia and what you think our policy should be, and whether Putin's nuclear saber rattling has been effective. I'll pivot a little bit now to the State Department and the career tracks. As you know, there's political, econ, public diplomacy, consular, and management. But for a brief time, there was also an environment, science, and technology, or EST track, which I switched to from management. While I was in Moscow, they eliminated the EST track, so I joined the political track and had leadership roles, consul general twice, deputy chief of mission. The work ranged from sports diplomacy to helping Americans in prison to counter narcotics, often all on the same day. Then President Obama nominated me to be ambassador to the Marshall Islands. The Senate confirmed me, and the Marshallese accepted me after agrément. That's the host country's opportunity to say yes or no to an incoming ambassador. The Marshallese government had two questions. Did I fish? And did I drink Budweiser? I said yes to both. So where are we talking about? The Marshall Islands is tiny in population, fewer than 50,000 people, but rather than a small island nation, they call themselves a large ocean country with 750,000 square miles of ocean, 4 hours west of Honolulu. On to Runit Dome and more Cold War fallout. Runit Dome is not a place I worry about, but it is a symbol of our nuclear era. It's a huge concrete cap covering nuclear debris from some of the 67 Cold War tests in the Marshall Islands. It's essentially radioactive stuff bulldozed into a pit and covered with a concrete cap. Despite some headlines that it's a ticking time bomb, the radioactive material already communicates with the environment. The bottom of the pit is in contact with seawater. The radionuclides tend not to migrate far, so this is not a doomsday scenario, but like everything else nuclear, it requires maintenance and attention. The U.S. Marshallese relationship also requires maintenance and attention. Because of those 67 tests, I think the U.S. has a moral obligation to look out for the Marshalls, one of the most vulnerable countries in the world to sea level rise. It's an atoll nation, just a few meters above sea level on average. A bit more context, there were several battles in the Marshall Islands during World War II, with 4 medals of honor accorded to servicemen, mostly for throwing themselves on grenades. There's still a U.S. military base there, a rather unique part of America's national security architecture, the Reagan Space and Missile Defense Facility. Intercontinental ballistic missiles fired from Vandenberg Air Base in California land in Kwajalein Lagoon. I invited Undersecretary of State Rose Gottemoeller, who we met earlier in Moscow days, to come to the Marshalls to commemorate Remembrance Day. That marks the day on March 1st, 1954, when the U.S. tested its largest hydrogen bomb ever, the Bravo test. The winds either shifted or, according to some, the Navy deliberately used the test to see the effects of radiation on the nearby population. People were exposed, developed cancer, and died, and it's tragic. The test is marked every day with Remembrance Day in the Marshalls. The Undersecretary in her speech said, in part, "I know that words can only go so far in healing wounds, but this nation has played an outsized role in the fight for a safer world, and for that, the United States and the world thanks you. Of course, the mutual security of our nations is an underlying element of the special relationship between our nations. Marshallese citizens serve with distinction in our armed forces, sharing our commitment to democracy and freedom. On this day, the 60th anniversary of Bravo, and on each and every day, the United States recognizes the effects of its nuclear explosive testing and has accepted and acted on its responsibility. Since 2004, the United States has provided over $600 million to the Marshall Islands in the form of direct assistance and subsidies, as well as financial support for rehabilitation of affected atolls, site monitoring, and ongoing healthcare programs. This year, the Department of Energy initiated a remarkable sponsorship program to increase the science capacity in the Marshall Islands. 2 Marshallese students will live and work in the San Francisco Bay Area, including at Lawrence Livermore National Labs. Gottemoeller goes on to call for U.S. ratification of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. 187 countries have signed the CTBT, and 178 have ratified it. Disarmament is not just about treaties, it's about education. By understanding the history and the legacy of nuclear weapons, you as future leaders, scientists, and diplomats can push for new frameworks that prioritize both peace and the environment. The Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty remains unsigned by the U.S. and other key nations. Educating ourselves and advocating for change is part of disarmament. My almost 4 years in the Marshall Islands showed me how people live with the daily consequences of decisions made decades ago. Nuclear disarmament and stewardship must never be a forgotten priority. So what's the one thing the Undersecretary didn't say? Something that the U.S. rarely says, and that is, we're sorry. But Rose was moved by her visit and tasked the embassy with coming up with a list of potential development projects, new airports, roads, schools, etc. It was a several billion-dollar wish list, and when we got finished, unfortunately, the Marshallese decided to take the U.S. to the International Court of Justice on the nuclear legacy, and Rose dropped the development project. There have been other missteps and miscommunications. The Department of Energy at one point reported polonium levels and not plutonium. That caused the people of Bikini, who had gone back to resettle, to leave. The good news is that levels of cesium-137 and other radionuclides can be lowered or even neutralized with the application of potassium. So there's a way to remediate the soil. The marine environment has also rebounded. Shark Week did a special on the robust shark population in Bikini. As important as the nuclear legacy issues are, it's really climate and sea level rise that are the existential threats to the Marshall Islands. And that issue has produced some of the most powerful advocates for change. Statesman Tony DeBruym led the High Ambition Coalition in Paris, getting the world to agree to a goal of capping global warming at 1.5 degrees. Tony witnessed the Bravo test at age 5 and passed away from cancer in 2017. Another powerful voice is poet Kathy Jetnell Kitchener. I sent this poem to the UN committee seeking worldwide candidates for the 2012 Civil Society Speaker at the UN's Climate Summit, and this is what the committee saw. If you can play that, Travis.
Is that the Tell Them poem?
Yeah, tell them. That was her application.
Okay. Loading now.
All right. And if not, we can give folks the links later. I see your comment, Jennifer. In fact, you cried when she read it. The UN committee actually cried when they heard it, and they said, "We found our speaker."
All right, here we go.
All righty.
Grammarly now uses AI to help you write, not just revise. Type a prompt and generate.
There you go.
I prepared the package for my friends in the States. The dangling earrings woven into half moons, black pearls glinting like an eye in a storm of tight spirals. The baskets, sturdy, also woven. Brown cowrie shell shiny, intricate mandalas shaped by calloused fingers. Inside the basket, I write a message. Wear these earrings to parties, to classes and meetings, to the corner store, the grocery store, and while riding the bus. Store jewelry, incense, copper coins, and curling letters like this one in this basket. And when others ask you where you got this, you tell them they're from the Marshall Islands. Show them where it is on a map. Tell them we are a proud people toasted dark brown as the carved ribs of a tree stump. Tell them we are descendants of the finest navigators in the world. Tell them our islands were dropped from a basket carried by a giant. Tell them we are the hollow hulls of canoes as fast as the wind slicing through the Pacific Sea. We are wood shavings and drying pandanus leaves and siquipiros at kemems. Tell them we are the sweet harmonies of mothers, aunties, sisters, songs late into night. Tell them we are whispered prayers, the breath of God, a crown of fuchsia flowers encircling Auntie Mary's white seafoam hair. Tell them we are styrofoam cups of Kool-Aid red, waiting patiently for the Ilomid. We are papaya golden sunsets bleeding into a glittering open sea. We are skies uncluttered, majestic and sweeping in their landscape. We are the ocean, terrifying and regal in its power. Tell them we are dusty rubber slippers swiped from concrete doorsteps. We are the ripped seams and the broken door handles of taxis. We are sweaty hands shaking another sweaty hand in heat. Tell them we are days and nights hotter than anything you can imagine. Tell them we are little girls with braids, cartwheeling beneath the rain. We are shards of broken beer bottles burrowed beneath fine, white sand. We are children, flinging like rubber bands across a road clogged with chugging cars. Tell them we only have one road. And after all this, tell them about the water, how we have seen it rising, flooding across our cemeteries, gushing over our seawalls, and crashing against our homes. Tell them what it's like to see the entire ocean level with the land. Tell them we are afraid. Tell them we don't know of the politics or the science, but we see what is in our own backyard. Tell them some of us are old fishermen who believe that God made us a promise. Tell them some of us are a little bit more skeptical of God. But most importantly, Tell them we don't want to leave. We've never wanted to leave. And that we are nothing without our islands.
Yeah. And do you think, Travis, we have time for her UN presentation as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. Well, this is once the UN folks had a look at it, this is then
Our
the
next speaker was
yeah. Cool.
All right, here we go.
selected from more than Our next speaker was selected from more than 500 candidates to represent the voice of civil society. From the Marshall Islands, please welcome Kathy Jetnil Kijiner.
Yaweko Maulib. My family and I have traveled a long way to be here today, all the way from the Marshall Islands. The Marshall Islands encompasses more than 2 million square kilometers of ocean, and so it makes sense that our culture is one of voyaging and navigation. One of our most beloved legends features a canoe race between 10 brothers. Their mother, holding a heavy bundle, begged each of her sons for a ride on their canoe. But only the youngest listened and took her along for the ride, not knowing that his mother was carrying the first sail. With the sail, he won the race and became chief. The moral of the story is to honor your mother and the challenges life brings. Climate change is a challenge that few want to take on, but the price of inaction is so high. Those of us from Oceania are already experiencing it firsthand. We've seen waves crashing into our homes and our breadfruit trees wither from the salt and drought. We look at our children and wonder how they will know themselves or their culture should we lose our islands. Climate change affects not only us islanders, it threatens the entire world. To tackle it, we need a radical change of course. This isn't easy, I know. It means ending carbon pollution within my lifetime. It means supporting those of us most affected to prepare for unavoidable climate impacts. And it means taking responsibility for irreversible loss and damage caused by greenhouse gas emissions. The people who support this movement are Indigenous mothers like me, families like mine, and millions more, standing up for the changes needed and working to make them happen. I ask world leaders to take us all along on your ride. We won't slow you down. We'll help you win the most important race of all, the race to save humanity. I would now like to share with you a poem that I have written for my daughter, Matefele Benham. Dear Matefele Benham, you are a 7-month-old sunrise of gummy smiles. You are bald as an egg and bald as the Buddha. You are thighs that are thunder, shrieks that are lightning, so excited for bananas, hugs, and our morning walks along the lagoon. Dear Matefele Benham, I want to tell you about that lagoon, that lazy lounging lagoon, lounging against the sunrise. Men say that one day that lagoon will devour you. They say it will gnaw at the shoreline, chew at the roots of your breadfruit trees, gulp down rows of seawalls, and crunch through your island's shattered bones. They say you, your daughter, and your granddaughter too, will wander, rootless, with only a passport to call home. Dear Matefele Benham, don't cry. Mommy promises you, no one will come and devour you. No greedy whale of a company sharking through political seas. No backwater bullying of businesses with broken morals. No blindfolded bureaucracies gonna push this mother ocean over the edge. No one's drowning, baby. No one's moving. No one's losing their homeland. No one's becoming a climate change refugee. Or should I say, no one else. To the Carteret Islanders of Papua New Guinea and to the Taro Islanders of Fiji, I take this moment to apologize to you. We are drawing the line here. because we, baby, are going to fight. Your mommy, daddy, boo-boo, Jima, your country, and your president too, we will all fight. And even though there are those hidden behind platinum titles who like to pretend that we don't exist, who like to pretend that the Marshall Islands, Tuvalu, Kiribati, Maldives, Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines, floods of Algeria, Colombia, Pakistan, and all the hurricanes, earthquakes, and tidal waves didn't exist, still, there are those who see us, hands reaching out, fists raising up, banners unfurling, megaphones booming, and we are canoes blocking coast ships. We are the radiance of solar villages. We are the fresh, clean soil of the farmers past. We are teenagers blooming petitions. We are families biking, recycling, reusing, engineers building, dreaming, designing, artists painting, dancing, writing, and we are spreading the word. And there are thousands out on the streets, marching hand in hand, chanting for change now. And they're marching for you, baby. They're marching for us, because we deserve to do more than just survive. We deserve to thrive. Dear Mata Filipinum, you are eyes heavy with drowsy weight. So just close those eyes and sleep in peace, because we won't let you down. You'll see.
So that was the first standing ovation since Nelson Mandela addressed world leaders. You'll notice the line she said, "We never wanted to leave." That refers to Bikini's evacuation for the Bikini test. So this is golden opportunity number 2 to go to Bikini. Hang on a sec. Yeah. Golden opportunity number 2 is to go to Bikini and determine when it's safe to live there again. It's safe to visit, but not to live off the land. Another thing is awareness. When you hear the word bikini, the Bravo test is probably not the first image that comes to mind, but people should know about the Marshall Islands and the price they paid for our national security. One other related issue, deep sea mining. Marine scientists advocate that we follow the precautionary principle. If we don't know the effect of a certain policy or action, don't do it until we do. And that was certainly disregarded with respect to nuclear testing. We don't know the effects of deep sea mining, and we don't even know all the organisms in the deep sea. So let's not engage in deep sea mining until we really know the outcome. So I look forward to questions on the Marshall Islands. I also hope this talk gives you a sense of why it's such a risk to national security to slash the State Department budget and workforce. I'll do a little recruiting with the caveat that the Foreign Service today is not the one I left in 2016. One of the core tenets since World War II has been universality, the belief that the U.S. should be everywhere because we have interests everywhere, and Americans are everywhere. And that's threatened by the current budget cuts and isolationism. There are fewer career ambassadors now. They all tend to be political appointees. Still, the career offers a real challenge every day, the opportunity to learn languages and make a difference. So golden opportunity number 3, which I think you're all onto already, is take the Foreign Service exam. And I would like nothing better than to come see one of you raise your right hand and swear an oath to the Constitution. Today's fight for nuclear disarmament and environmental justice needs all hands, physicists, policymakers, environmentalists, advocates. Whether your passion is law, science, education, or community engagement, I urge you to find your link in the chain reaction that brings about real change. And let people know the true costs of nuclear weapons and conflict. Be a voice for disarmament and responsible stewardship in the classroom, the lab, and public service, and join global efforts to heal the scars of past testing through research, policy work, or education. Nuclear weapons are so indiscriminate that using one would have to be considered a war crime, and yet we produce thousands of them and still have to maintain them, decommission them, and store them every day from now until forever. We need to be good stewards of what we've produced. As the Blue Oyster Cult song Godzilla says, history shows again and again how nature points up the folly of man. our challenges are man-made: climate change, nuclear stewardship, deep sea mining. I'll close with some indigenous wisdom from Marshallese statesman Tony DeBroom. This is Tony telling a story at the United Nations.
Monday.com, the opposite of any work platform we tried in the past. We tried other work management platforms, not named.
There is a story told in the Marshalls of a beach where, first of all, where the barracuda and the hermit crab had a race. And that translates into the hare and the tortoise story in American storytelling time. But from that same beach one day, a small sparrow was walking along the beach, and a great big whale came up to the shore and started to scare him. A 50-ton whale making strange noises like "batra batra oo," scaring this little bird. And the bird said to the whale, "Please, you're making me nervous. You're making me scared." The whale says, "I'm the biggest guy in the ocean. I can do anything I want." So the bird called on the other birds, and they send the message out to all the other birds throughout the world, around the world. And each bird swooped down on the ocean and took one drop of water. And the ocean dried up. And the ocean dried up, and the birds held the water until the whale said, "I give up." And they spat it back on and maintained the balance. But they won. They won the contest. From that story comes a Marshallese saying, "An bilin ko ba kamanlamado." The ocean is made up of drops. Each one of us is responsible for a drop of ocean. You take care of that drop, and he takes care of his drop, and she takes care of her drop. We can take care of the world.
There you go. I really like Tony. I miss him. He was really a special guy. Also created the world's largest shark sanctuary and did all kinds of great things. But that's my show. I'm happy to take questions and glad most of you hung in there for this. We're listening to a little Godzilla.
Thank you. Let's hear it for Ambassador Tom. Let's see in the chat. Let's see those claps.
Emma?
Thank you.
Well, thank you guys. And believe me, the questions do not have to be limited to nuclear issues or environmental issues. I know you all are very focused on the Foreign Service and have a lot of different avenues and insights into it. So, ask me anything is definitely the theme.
So just so we can keep the flow, and we do have time. So the time right now is 7:48. So for the next, let's say 12 minutes, we can take questions. If you will, you can either put your questions in a chat and I will read them, or you can raise your hand on using the emoji up here, and I'll do an example of that, just like that. And I will be able to see who's first or next, and I'll call you so you can ask your question directly. Okay. First, we have Nathan Garcia.
Hi there. First of all, thank you so much. I was glued to that presentation the whole time. My question is, when you said earlier that there was a laser on your shirt, do you mean that literally?
Yeah. It was a red dot. I was on we had a shuttle bus that took us back to our community, and I interpreted that to mean stop asking questions or bad things are going to happen to you. I guess in the spectrum of possibilities, it's possible that it was some kid, but I sort of doubt that. You know, it's Moscow, you know, and they do follow you everywhere, and it's a pretty intense environment. But yeah, that's a real story. I also had in the Soviet days, I joined just before the Soviet Union fell apart, and I did some reporting on the Baltics and went back to then Leningrad, and they either put something in the water or something, but I was so disoriented and dizzy that I could barely walk across the room, and they finally called a Soviet doctor and he fixed me up. But they play hardball.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're on mute, Nate.
Yeah, wow. Did that at all change the way you looked at approaching policy or just your approach in general to things?
It was more a case of message received, and I think I was pushing the limits a little bit, thinking that after the Cold War, we were able to communicate more openly about things like nuclear issues, and I think that sort of told me the outside limit, you know, or the guardrails, as you talk about, you know, right and left limits the military always talks about. I think I definitely came up across one of the limits where it wasn't productive to go down that road with them, and the Russians just chipped away at the cooperation year by year until we are where we are now, where, you know, the relationship is completely off the rails. We don't even have the consulates in Russia anymore. The Ukraine war is just a disaster, and I hope Russia can find a way back. I worked with very talented Russian people, but they've taken a wrong turn. I think Putin's done a disservice to his country.
Wow, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Great question.
Next hand, we have Jennifer Soley.
Hey. Okay. So I guess my question is, and again, thank you, Ambassador Tom, for being here and sharing your experience. My question is, how do you reconcile your own personal beliefs about what U.S. policy has done to other countries, and how do you reconcile what you believe and what you are required to push out there as a narrative or as policies for these countries if you don't necessarily agree with them? How do you reconcile that in your brain?
Yeah, I think just like I was just talking about right and left limits, I think everybody's going to have a limit to what they can support. And one of the best examples for me was a colleague who quit during the first Trump administration because of the NATO rhetoric. He was posted in one of the Baltic countries, and to hear a U.S. president withdraw support for NATO, which has been so critical to our security for so many years, was just a bridge too far for him, and he left. I served in a lot of out of the way places, and so I could I don't want to say make policy, but you know what I said on nuclear issues normally didn't get cleared by the assistant secretary. You know, so I could say what I thought, and I didn't feel too constrained. But I think it's something that all of you going into the career are going to be asking yourselves as you go through it. And you know, some days you're working on AIDS, you're working on U.S. hostages or prisoners, you know, business development. You're working on things that are not necessarily the issues of the day, and you know you're doing good work. But there are gonna be other times where you've got to carry the water on a message that you don't like, and it's tough. You know, you just have to decide if you can do it or not.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good question.
Yeah.
Next, we have a question from the chat, and it is from Rachel Dunsmore. Her first question is, what is your, I'll just give you the full question. What is your opinion of how effective U.S. sanctions on Russia have been? And to what extent do you think they have caused Putin to alter his behavior?
I don't think they've been effective of late. And I think that we also step back from intelligence sharing with our allies, which is not helpful. We didn't provide some of the more advanced weapons that the Ukrainians need. I think in general, not just sanctions, but just military cooperation and assistance, I think we've fallen short of the mark. And with sanctions, the other difficulty has been enforcing them. Luckily, just this week, the French interdicted their second Russian shadow oil tanker. So the Europeans are starting to get serious about some of these sanctions. Sanctions do play a role, and it's not that I don't believe in them at all, but I think they really have to be robust, and Russia can absorb a lot of pain, as we've seen in this war.
Awesome.
I see another question.
That was good. Next hand, and thank you, Rachel, for that question, and also Nate and Jen. Next question is from Noah.
Yeah. Thank you, Ambassador. It was a really interesting discussion. I just had a question. So in the current state of the world, where it seems like there is more and more unsteadiness and volatile change on a day-to-day basis, and international relations, at least from a day-to-day civilian perspective, seems to be directed by various world leaders' tweets towards each other or explosive commentary. What do you see the role, or how do you see the role of embassies and detailed day-to-day diplomacy changing, if at all?
Yeah, I think it's diminished because of the way policy is conducted right now. I think there used to be a more formal policy, and maybe maybe I've got rose-colored glasses about the process in the past, but it seemed to me that before a summit, for example, you would have all kinds of position papers and, very well thought out policy prescriptions, talking points, all that stuff. And now we are kind of driven by tweets and things like that, and off the cuff remarks. So I don't think the policy process in Washington is as rigorous or detailed or as disciplined as it used to be. And I think that's probably too bad, because there is a lot of expertise in the State Department, and you kind of ignore it at your peril. Oh, I should also say, if you all haven't read it, and probably you have, but Bill Burns' book, The Back Channel, is really an excellent primer on diplomacy.
I will make sure to attach that to the description of the video.
Thank you.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you.
Great question. Next, we have Alicia. Did I say that right?
Yeah, that's Elisha.
Elisha, thank you.
Hi, thank you so much again for being here, Ambassador. Thanks for sharing your experience. It was really great to hear from you. I remember you mentioning earlier that you switched from is that environmental to political path or cone when you were assigned. What informed your decision making in this transition? Is this more of like a career strategy? Is this more of like a personal like your personal change that you wanted to make, or what was that like?
Sure.
If you could share more about it.
Yeah. Well, when I was a journalist, I covered a lot of environmental stories, and I liked science and environment. And I saw that the State Department was really doing some good work in climate and in protecting endangered species and international agreements. So I gravitated toward the EST track, but it was only open for just a very brief time. I've been a management officer, so in Helsinki, basically I was running a warehouse where we were bringing in supplies to build a new embassy in Moscow. And that was challenging, and I enjoyed it. But the environment science and technology was kind of more of a sweet spot for me. But when they did away with that, they said, okay, you can choose anything you want. And I thought, well, where they put the EST issues is under econ. And economics is just not my thing. I mean, should be, but I'm not a very economic type guy. And so I thought, well, okay, well, I'll try the political track. And that's how that worked out. But in general, you guys are going to have a more orderly career, I think. And mine's kind of an outlier.
Thank you. Thanks so much for answering that. So you did not go back to the management officer.
No, but I certainly did, I did public diplomacy, consular, you do everything at some point, which is a nice thing about the career.
I have a question as well, just in case anyone else has a question. You can think of your question and put it in the chat or raise your hand. Also, the time is 8 o'clock. We traditionally will hold maybe just an additional 15 minutes for anyone who has any additional questions. So if you have to go, we understand, but we are about to conclude here in a moment. And I do see a question that just came in. So I'm going to go ahead and ask my question quickly. So my track is management, and I've been in management pretty much for almost a couple of decades now. Is that the best route to get deeper into leadership, or pretty much all tracks have roads to becoming an ambassador or a DCM?
Yeah, that's a great question. Management definitely can lead to ambassadorships. Although right now, so many of the ambassadors positions are political appointees. But I think we'll go back to a more traditional thing after this administration. Management officers, first of all, oversee a lot of people. All of the Marine security guards, the local guards, all the local staff. So you've got great experience managing people and leading people, and that's a strong suit for leadership positions. Political officers tend to manage like one office assistant, so that's not always the best prescription to lead an entire embassy. So any of the tracks can lead to senior foreign service and to ambassadorships. But I think you're best to do what you feel drawn to. If you feel like helping out American citizens, then consular is probably what you want to look at. If you're more of an analytical person wanting to understand the politics of a country and the dynamics in that country, then political or econ is best. And then public diplomacy for folks who like to write speeches and do events. They all have strong suits. And I don't think any of them, there've been ambassadors from all of those career tracks.
Thank you for that response.
Yeah.
We have one more question, and this may be our last, unless there is one more that comes up in the chat or by raised hand. And this is from Melinda. She asked, well, first she says, thank you, Ambassador. You've clearly had a long, successful career with the State Department. What advice would you give future diplomats to thrive during their service? You've mentioned language skills, which I completely agree is a huge factor in being happy while living abroad. Other pieces of advice?
Wow. I wish I could do it all over again so I could do it right. I think be collegial, enjoy it and be, is there an age limit for ambassadors? I think for political ambassadors, there's not. For the rest of us, 65 is the age limit. Sorry, I just saw that in the chat. But advice during the career is really enjoy the places you go, take advantage of every opportunity you get. And I know when we used to have presidential visits and congressional visits overseas, I would always volunteer for them. And people said, well, why are you doing that? It's It's like, it's a codel. It's a lot of work. And I liked it because that's the chance to really advance American policy. You know, when the president comes to town for 2 or 3 days, or even if it's a few hours, it's a chance to really get some deliverables and move the ball forward. So to me, that's the most fascinating part of the job. And that's when embassies are working on all cylinders, when you've got a presidential visit. So take advantage of those, raise your hand, say, yes, I'd like to do that. Try to do some of the other career tracks, and definitely get out of the embassy, because, you know, outside of the embassy is where the action really is.
Awesome. An additional question. Are there any skills that you wish you'd learned prior to becoming an FSO that you weren't able to learn on the job?
I'm going to take the question a little bit differently and just say that the State Department doesn't always reward training. People think, oh, if I'm in language training for 10 months, I'm not going to get promoted. And I think, don't worry about that. Take advantage of all the training you can get. They have classes on negotiations. They have all kinds of different leadership and management classes. So it's usually not looked at as a way to advance by taking classes at the Foreign Service Institute, but it is really worth it. As far as coming in, I think I had a basic generalist's, you know, toolbox. By having been a journalist, I could write pretty quickly, things like that. So I didn't feel like I was in too much over my head when I got started, but you're always learning something new, and you've got to really be willing to continue to learn throughout your career, because you're going to a whole new set of problems every country you go to, whole new set of players. And so just continue to learn about stuff.
Great question. One thing I personally identify with you, Ambassador Tom, is that I come from print media and digital media as a journalist as well. And although it wasn't on purpose, it was kind of just as a favor. Somebody asked me to do it, and then I enjoyed it from that point. And I just think that that's just everything of what you just said, how it is important to embrace what skills you are bringing to the table, your background, everything is needed to have a successful chain reaction into service. In fact, there's one final question from the chat. I'm going to make a statement prior to that. In fact, it's actually about Jennifer's presentation that she did earlier this month. You mentioned during this presentation that you've noticed how tweets can influence diplomacy. There's actually something that Jennifer put in her presentation about diplomatic chain reactions, or is that the name of this one? It was so similar, or ripple effects of diplomacy across the world. Have you seen that happen probably more often than you would desire, how social media or media influence what actually happened in diplomacy?
It's just part of the landscape now, and you need to be adept at it and nimble, so that when you have, you know, say you have an NBA basketball coach come for a public diplomacy event, you know, make sure you get something up on Facebook right away, you know, do little tweets and make the most of visitors and things like that. I think embassies can use those tools. I think they're more useful actually than not. And I saw a question also about the staff, how big the staff was in Mondro. We were probably full-time staff, like 12 people, but then we had the base, the Army garrison in Kwajalein that was kind of part of the embassy community. But that's one thing, you're going to go to embassies that are tiny, like the Marshall Islands. And then in Moscow, I had 900 colleagues, you know, everybody from NASA to Internal Revenue, Treasury, you know, all kinds of military folks. So you really are going to have a huge mix of embassies and challenges. But you also get a lot of TDYers in the Marshall Islands. We had a drought, so we had FEMA people come in, we had USAID people come in. So you've got, you know, a core group that's at the embassy, pretty small or group consular management, so on. But then you're going to have a lot of people to draw resources from that come in and support you.
All right. Final item here. You and I had a conversation offline about people who may get discouraged about taking the FSOT and failing it once, twice, or even more. I think you have an experience with people, and maybe even including yourself, who have taken it more than once. Do you have any advice for those?
Yeah, the world record I heard about was 13 times. Somebody took it 13 times, got in. I hope she loves it. I did not pass the first time around, and I wasn't high enough on the register. I passed subsequently, but still wasn't high enough on the register to get an offer. So just keep taking it. They don't average your scores. They don't, I think they actually like to see the persistence when you get to the oral assessment, rather than thinking, oh, this person has taken it before and didn't make it, we're not interested. I think it's the opposite, that, oh wow, this person really wants to get in, really has something they want to contribute, and we need to figure out and find out what it is. So yeah, don't get discouraged. And the other thing is, because the average age is, say, 30 or something like that, think about, doing something else in the interim that could be overseas, military or Peace Corps, whatever it is. Do that for 5 or 6 years and then join the State Department, because most people don't come in right out of college anyway.
If we have time for one final question, it is from the chat. It is from Jennifer. Did you ever reach out to a former ambassador when you were at a loss and where you didn't know what to do, or reach out to someone when that has done it before, like as far as just for advice from other ambassadors?
Yeah, definitely. It was really more as Consul General in Nuevo Laredo. We had a lot of drug violence, and because Mexico is such a big country with a lot of consulates, the consuls general would get together once a week and share stories and information. And to me, that was one of the best collegial experiences, because I'd say, look, we had an American beaten to death in prison. Have you guys had something like that happen to you? And how are we going to get through this? So yeah, you can find a lot of support with your colleagues, and the best thing is just to reach out to people in your region that are your peers. Doesn't have to be, you don't have to wait till you're ambassador. If you're a consular officer doing visa work, reach out to the neighboring posts and things like that, and you'll find that that's helpful.
Ambassador Tom, thank you so much for your visit. Today is January 26th. We're so grateful and thankful for you stopping by and bringing a wealth of knowledge. I've personally have learned so much, and I can tell you that from the chat and also from the claps from the chat, that they have learned a lot as well. We hope that you come back, because I have so many other questions, including about your experience in different cones or different tracks. But we'll get to those maybe in the future if you if you have time for us later. So thankful that you have time for us today. Thank you. Thank you so much.
I'd love to hear some of your stories. I wish you all the best, and you're a talented group, and go get them.
Well, we're gonna do what he said. We're gonna go get it. So a lot of you are gonna be taking the FSOT this upcoming February / March. Please do nothing less than your best, so you can have some good news for Ambassador Tom. Also, if you have any feedback for tonight's presentation, please do email me, because I love to read your emails, at travis@thefsot.com. Or if you would like to lead a study session, please also email me at travis@thefsot.com. Also, the best place to prepare for the FSOT is thefsot.com. Thank you so much for being here. And if you did not know, what does Matthew McConaughey and Ambassador Tom Armbruster have in common? I will go ahead and tell you, because I can tell he wants to know as well. I was one of the first 10 subscribers on their YouTube channels. So in the chat, please do subscribe. because although he's no longer a journalist, he still has the heart to tell the story. We love YouTube, we love videos, and he still has more for you. So thank you so much. he didn't know I was going to do that. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope everyone has a great night, and we look forward to seeing you at our next session.